Surah 79. An-Nazi'ath. Context. Period of revelation. According to Abdullah bin Abbas, this surah was sent down after Surah 78, An-Naba. Its subject matter also testifies that it belongs to the earliest period at Mecca. The theme and subject matter. Its theme is affirmation of resurrection and the life hereafter. It also warns of the consequences of belying the messenger of God. The surah opens with oaths sworn by the angels, who take the soul at deaths, and those who hasten to carry out God's commands, and those who conduct the affairs of the universe according to divine will, to assure that the resurrection will certainly come to pass, and the second life after death will certainly take place. For the angels who are employed to pluck out the soul today, can also be employed to restore the soul tomorrow. And the angels who promptly execute God's commands and conduct the affairs of the universe today, can also upset the order of the universe tomorrow by orders of the same God, and can also bring about a new order. After this, the people have been told, so as to say,
"This work which you regard as absolutely impossible, is not any difficult for God, for which He may have to make lengthy preparations. Just a single jolt will upset this system of the world, and a second jolt will be enough to cause you to appear as living beings in the new world. At that time, the same people who deny it, would be trembling with fear, and seeing with awestruck eyes all that they thought was impossible."
Then, relating the story of the prophet Moses and Pharaoh briefly, the people have been warned to the effect,
"You know full well what fate the Pharaoh met in consequence of belying the messenger, and rejecting the guidance brought by him, and endeavoring to defeat his mission by trickery and deceit. If you do not learn any lesson from it, nor change your ways and attitude accordingly, you also will have to meet the same fate."
Then in verses 27 to 13, arguments have been given for the hereafter and life after death. In this regard, the deniers have been asked the question,
"Is your resurrection a more difficult task, or the creation of the huge universe, which spreads around you to infinite distances with myriads of its stars and planets? Your recreation cannot be difficult for the God for whom this was an easy task."
Thus, after presenting in a single sentence a decisive argument for the possibility of the hereafter, attention has been drawn to the earth and its provisions, that have been arranged in it for the sustenance of man and animal, and of which everything testifies that it has been created with great wisdom for fulfilling some special purpose. Pointing to this, the question has been left for the intellect of man to ponder for itself and form the opinion
whether calling man to account after having delegated authority and responsibilities to a creature like him, in this wise system would be more in keeping with the demands of wisdom, or that he should die after committing all sorts of misdeeds in the world, and should perish and mix in the dust forever, and should never be called to account as to how he employed the authority and fulfilled the responsibilities entrusted to him."
Instead of discussing this question, in verses 34 to 41, it has been said,
"When the hereafter is established, men's eternal future will be determined on the criterion as to which of them rebelled against his God, transgressing the bounds of service, and made the material benefits and pleasures his objective of life, and which of them feared standing before his Lord and refrained from fulfilling the unlawful desires of the self."
This by itself provides the right answer to the above question to every such person who considers it honestly, free from stubbornness. For the only rational, logical, and moral demand of giving authority and entrusting responsibilities to man in the world is that he should be called to account on this very basis ultimately, and rewarded or punished accordingly. In conclusion, the question of the disbelievers of Mecca as to when resurrection will take place has been answered. They asked the Prophet this question over and over again. In reply, it has been said that the knowledge of the time of its occurrence rests with God alone. The messenger is there only to give the warning that it will certainly come. Now whoever wishes may mend his ways, fearing its coming, and whoever wishes may behave and conduct himself as he likes, fearless of its coming. When the appointed time comes, those very people who love the life of this world, and regarded its pleasures as the only objective of life, would feel that they had stayed in the world only for an hour or so. Then they will realize how utterly they had ruined their future, for the sake of the short-lived pleasures of the world. Surah 79. An-Nazi'ath. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. By those angels who extract, with violence. And by those who remove, with ease. And by those who glide, as if swimming. And those who race each other, in a race. And those who arrange each matter. On the day, the blast of the horn will convulse creation, there will follow it, the subsequent one. Hearts that day will tremble, their eyes humbled. They are presently saying, will we indeed, be returned to our former state of life? Even if we should be decayed bones? They say, that then would be a losing return, indeed it will be but one shout. And suddenly they will be alert, upon the earth's surface. Has there reached you the story of Moses? When his Lord called to him, in the sacred valley of Tuah, go to Pharaoh, indeed he has transgressed. And say to him, would you be willing to purify yourself? And let me guide you to your Lord, so you would fear him? And he showed him the greatest sign, but he, Pharaoh, denied and disobeyed. Then he turned his back, striving, plotting, and he gathered his people, and called out and said, I am your most exalted Lord. So, God seized him in exemplary punishment. For the last, and the first, transgression, indeed in that, is a lesson, warning, for whoever would fear God. Are you a more difficult creation, or is the heaven? He, God, constructed it. He raised its ceiling, and proportioned it. And he darkened its night, and extracted its brightness, and after that, he spread the earth. He extracted from it, its water, and its pasture. And the mountains, he set firmly as enjoyment, provision, for you, and your grazing livestock. But when there comes, the greatest overwhelming calamity, the day when the human being will remember, that for which he strove. And hellfire will be exposed, for all those who see. So, as for he, who transgressed and preferred the life of the world, then indeed, hellfire will be his refuge. But as for he, who feared the position of his Lord, and prevented the soul, from unlawful inclination, then indeed paradise, will be his refuge. They ask you, O Muhammad, about the hour, when is its arrival? In what position are you, that you should mention it? To your Lord is its finality, you are only a warner, for those who fear it. It will be, on the day they see it, as though they had not remained in the world, except for an afternoon, or a morning thereof.